Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. In this show, I will introduce you to ideas, concepts, and mindsets that will open your mind to a new world of well-being and personal life growth. Through eye-opening interviews, we elevate people in the world doing amazing things for humanity and share insights that will shift you to become the happiest, healthiest, kindest, and most compassionate version of you. Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2022. Gosh, it sounds ridiculous even saying 2022. Coming into a new year, we've got the opportunity to review the last 12 months and create a fresh start for ourselves in some way. Perhaps looking at what worked for us last year and what didn't, what we'd like to change. During these testing COVID times especially, many more of us have had the realization that in life we need to make sure we're seeking happiness and doing the things that really light us up, being around the people that bring out the best in us. I hope that this fresh new year brings about some wonderful conscious change for you and that happiness and contentment flows into your life. I am personally thrilled to be back sharing the show with you, and this year this podcast is going to be bigger and better than ever before, with new inspiring guests, empowering conversations, and full of things you literally can't unhear. Today we're kicking off the new year and the first episode with Seamus Evans. You may know Seamus from his many years hosting Toasted TV and Totally Wild, and from his stints on breakfast radio. He's a seasoned TV presenter and personality who recently had a shift in his career and began his journey public speaking about his own unique message and sharing his experience with Tourettes Syndrome and how he turned what he calls his FLAW into his superpower. Seamus was born with Tourette's and was officially diagnosed when he was about 10 years old. And he talks about his acceptance of his condition and how for so many years he tried to hide away from it, desperately not wanting to be different. His message teaches us how to be our true selves and stop holding ourselves back. It is completely inspiring, and there's something in this chat for everyone. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Seamus Evans, to Things You Can't Unhear. It is so good to see your face again.
Yeah, it is. It's been many years since I saw your face. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
No one can see your face, unfortunately. This is a podcast, but you always have this amazing, beautiful, happy energy and smile on your face that is so, just transmits to other people. It's lovely. So it's an amazing quality to have, Seamus.
Thank you. Thankfully, it's the only thing that is contagious that I have. I don't have anything else that anyone can catch.
Well, it's a good thing to catch, that's for sure. Now, I've been following your journey. Now, we've touched on working together in media for a couple of years back, about five years ago, I think, when you moved to Melbourne. And since then, you've been doing amazing things. You've worked on breakfast radio, you've worked on Totally Wild, you've worked on Toasted TV, you've done the circuits as a TV presenter and personality, mainly in the children's arena. And now you've got a change of career. There's been a massive shift in your career, and I've really stood up and noticed what you've been doing, because it aligns very much to what we talk about on this show a lot. And I feel like what you're talking about when you stand on stage as a motivational speaker is definitely things that people can't unhear, and things that people will walk away from and actually decide to make changes in their life because they have heard you say them. So I would love to know what inspired you to make that huge shift in your career to go from this well-known TV personality working on amazing programs on, leading networks, to now speaking in public, motivating young people and corporates all around the country and the world.
Well, I guess my 13-year career in the media came to an end overnight due to COVID-19. And I had such a great career working on kids shows, breakfast radio. Jumping from TV to radio was so difficult, and making that change I was really proud of that. But yeah, look, I came to 13 years and I hadn't stopped working full time since I got out of high school. I went straight into a kids show at 18. And so I took that time, I got the payout, I moved back home with mum and dad, and I just stopped and I did nothing. And I completely reset because I had never had that break. All of my friends went to uni after school and they had all these, what seemed to me like these giant breaks. And I never did. And so I was like, oh, I just want to do nothing. I just want to relax. I want to do nothing. And I just want to reset. And after doing that, I kind of came to this mindset of my career has been amazing, but it's always been in the limelight. And even though entertaining is a very important part of society, you've got to entertain people, on their way to work while they're not wanting to get into the office. You want to entertain them so they feel happy about going to work and the drive in the morning. But I felt like I was always, my career was all about me. And it was always a little bit self-orientated of me. Oh, I'm on TV. Oh, I'm on radio. Oh, and I just kind of stopped and went, you know what? I think I want to give back a little bit. And I want to encourage people to not let their own insecurities be a setback. So I decided to, as I have Tourettes Syndrome, and that was a bit of a journey for me and a bit of a struggle to overcome the challenges associated with Tourette's, not only the physical and vocal tics that I have, but the stigmatism attached to it, to actually pursue a job in the public eye. And I remember discovering a bit of a passion for, look, that could have easily been a setback for me, but I didn't let it. And so I really wanted to send this message of, hey, we all are faced with something in our lives. No one is normal. There's no such thing as normal. Embrace it and don't let it be a setback, but really go for it. Go for what you want to do after school, in life, anything. And that I kind of, I guess I discovered a bit of a passion for encouraging people to do that. So I thought, you know what? That's what I'm going to do.
Such amazing messages in that I want to explore in a minute. But you talked about perhaps the ego. Was it the ego that you dropped that, a lot of people have working in media and, you get looked after as talent and, you're fussed upon and everything is sort of given to you and there's that shielding around you and you think you're pretty good. And then you may have a little awakening and dropping the ego and saying, oh, what's this all for anyway?
Well, it's interesting you say that. And I noticed that ego check when I went from television to radio, because I got my first job on TV at 18, straight out of school. And for 7 years. And so in my early 20s, my late teens and early 20s, I was on national television. In fact, I was on TV internationally because Totally Wild was on 53 different countries around the world. I was getting recognized at shopping centers. I was getting, jumping the queue at nightclubs. That really fueled my ego. And I thought I was amazing.
Especially at that age, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and then what happened is when I quit television, I was like, oh, I'll get a job. No worries on breakfast radio. I'm on TV. And I had this stupid idea of reality and my ego was so big. I thought so highly of myself that it would be easy. And then when I went to move to Melbourne, I got a very harsh reality check and I found out that no one actually cared. It was all in my head and I had to earn my stripes. And that was jumping from television to radio. That's where I really got a big, serious ego check. And honestly, I kind of crumbled and I slipped into a depression. I really struggled with my mental health because I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't as important as I thought I was in my early 20s. And I had to build myself back up again and really pursue radio and leave the ego at the door to say, no, you've got to start from scratch here and you've got to earn your stripes. And so that was my big ego check. It was then. But I guess when I lost my job on breakfast radio up in Cairns last year, I don't think there was an ego check. It was honestly, I'm not going to lie, it was a relief because doing breakfast radio is so much fun. It is the best job in the world, but you're up really early. I was up at 4:00 every morning and I was going to bed at midnight because I was doing stand-up comedy and I was partying. So I lived the dream up in Cairns. It was a really fun place, very big tourist town, and everything was open late at night. And I felt like a kid in a candy store. So I was out every night. I was doing stand-up. I was socializing. I was going to bed at midnight, waking up at 4 a.m. And I burnt the candle at both ends. So honestly, when they called me in, so what was really interesting is leading up to that moment, I was actually pitching to the executives of the Hit Network and Triple M. I was pitching them a night show that I wanted to host. And I was, recording all of these mock segments and pitching it to the bosses. And we got an email saying, a confidential email, a meeting tomorrow morning, 10:30 with the executive. And I'm like, yes, I've got the Gold Coast. I'm moving. I've made it. And the next line underneath was, feel free to bring a support person. I was like, oh no, that's it. It's done. It's a redundancy.
Wow.
But yeah, honestly, it was when I read that, I went, oh, thank goodness I get to rest. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. Sometimes we need that break. Sometimes we need that push too, to really go, okay, what's important? What's the next steps? And let yourself sort of let the dust settle and figure out what you really want to do.
Absolutely. In my keynote talk, I share my story about a cat that I had, my cat called Brandy, Puss, we used to call her. And when I was in school, I hated school, right? I was so disengaged in school. I never wanted to go. And I remember waking up, putting my high socks on, tying up my tie, and it was cold outside and it was raining and I did not want to go. And I'd look down at my cat and there she was, like all curled up by the window, and then she'd do a big stretch. And I was just like, stuff you stupid bitch. You don't have to go to school. And I remember thinking, I've always wanted to be my cat. And finally, like, I just wanted to do nothing with no care in the world. And that's what happened when I left breakfast radio. I was made redundant. I came home and I did exactly that. And what I learned is I would go to bed at 5 a.m. because I would just be up watching movies. I would lay down all day. I would get up whenever I wanted. And I only did what I wanted to do. And that was stand-up comedy. I'd do stand-up comedy 3 to 4 nights a week. And what that told me was, I thought, hang on, because I'd turned down radio jobs that would come to me because I thought, I just don't want to. I don't want to do anything yet. And I explored the concept of all I wanted to do is stand-up comedy. Okay, why? Well, it's because I like standing in front of a crowd on stage and entertaining. And it was exploring the yeses and exploring the nos. And when I realized that's what I wanted to do, be on stage and entertain, then I started to explore, well, how can I turn that into a job? Because it takes like 10 years of, doing 5-minute sets in nightclubs with 3 people watching before you're an amazing Dave Chappelle stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's not going to happen soon. And I need to get off Centrelink. So I need to make some money. And so I decided, you know what, then I'm going to do that same thing, but in schools and in conferences and in the corporate world. And that's how I'm going to make the money, because that's what I want to do.
Good on you in taking that leap and taking that risk and going, you know what, I'll do it myself. And, I've done that in my career as well. And it's been absolutely liberating to just be able to go, I'm not asking for permission. I'm not pitching anymore. I am actually doing the work that I am drawn to do and that I'm excited about. And you know what, you've actually got an amazing message to share. I mean, you were diagnosed with Tourette's Syndrome at 10. Is that right? Mm-hmm. How did the diagnosis come about?
So I was born with Tourette's. Well, I had tics as an infant because my sister would call me Snuffleupagus because I'd constantly wriggle my nose. When I was about 8, my tics really started to be very, very visible and very audible. So Tourette's is a neurological condition made up of tics, both motor and vocal tics. You must have both motor and vocal to be classified as Tourette's. And we didn't know that. In the 90s, growing up, we had never heard of Tourette's. We had no idea what it was. All we knew was that I twitched, and I didn't twitch like no one else twitched. It was just me. And what happened is I called them habits growing up because I didn't know what they were. And they would frustrate the hell out of me. And I hated them because I couldn't control them. I was like, whoa, what's going on? Why can't I stop flicking my hands? Why can't I stop flicking the hair out of my eyes when I don't have hair in my eyes anymore because I just got a haircut? and grunting, like constant blinking. And it would freak me out because I had no idea what it was. And the way it actually happened was at night before going to bed, I was on the edge of my bed and I was praying to God. And I said, God, take these habits away from me. And mum, hearing her 8-year-old, 9-year-old son ask for these things to be taken away, broke her heart. So she was like, oh, we've got to do something about this. This is too hard to handle. So we went to GPs, and then we got referred to specialists, neurologists, psychiatrists. And yeah, finally we got a specialist in Tourettes Syndrome. And yeah, he gave me the diagnosis at about 10.
So knowing that you had Tourette's, how did that sort of shift what you were going through? Was there an acceptance period? Did you go out there and let everyone know, or did you try and hide it? What was life for you like once you knew that you had this syndrome, this condition?
So getting the diagnosis didn't change anything. It just gave us something to call it. And instead of calling them habits, I called them tics, and I knew it was called Tourette's syndrome. But the acceptance journey came afterwards. The acceptance journey happened when I was getting into television. But through high school, I went through days of feeling confident enough to tell people, but most of the time I would just ignore it, and I would, deflect it and not. I wasn't overly forthright in telling many people because adolescence is hard enough. You think you're weird as you are, and the last thing you want is to be different. So I didn't want to be different. And so I just ignored them as much as I could, and ignored people asking me, and I'd come up with, funny quips and things to deflect it. Some days I was better than others, and other days I'd lie. A lot of the times when it came to at school dances and things, I would lie when the girls would ask, why do you keep twitching your shoulder, or why do you keep flicking your head? That's when I'd lie. But in the schoolyard or amongst friends, it didn't bother me. There were some bullies and stuff, as all, so many people go through, which was always a hard time. But the real true acceptance journey happened when I first got my job on Toasted TV, when the boss pulled me aside and said, why do you keep twitching? Because I didn't tell them when I got the job. They gave me the job and they didn't know. That's when I said, oh yeah, I've got Tourette's. And they really freaked out because they were like, oh my gosh, we just hired this kid who has Tourette's to be on TV. Like, oh, this is not going to go well. So they freaked out and said, they said, if Tourette's is going to be a problem, if you can't control it, we can fire you and get someone else. And that fear, dangling that little carrot of losing the only thing I wanted to do, because I failed school, I couldn't do anything else. So that's all I wanted. And the idea of my Tourette's stopping me from being the next Rove Live or Carl Stefanovic really affected me. So that's when I had to accept that I had Tourette's in order to work on them and work out a way to disguise them and manipulate them and change them. When I was diagnosed, my doctor told me that I could control them, so you can suppress them, but that is frowned upon. That is encouraged not to do, because suppressing is the same as not blinking. You can not blink, right? But it hurts, it gets frustrating. It's the same with tics. You can stop them, but it hurts, it gets frustrated, and they just come out later anyway. So you don't suppress. And I had to learn how to not suppress, but disguise and manipulate. So I would just change the way my body would move. I would experiment with different tics. Like, instead of ticking my shoulder up to my left ear, I would roll both of my shoulders back and I would just experiment with different movements around my tic to get that sensation out. Because the best way to describe a tic is like having an itch on your forearm, right? And you can just scratch it subconsciously. And what I realized is, if I was conscious about the itch on my arm, I could scratch it without it being so visible, rub it against your body or cross your arms and scratch with your other forearm. So there's just a different way to get that sensation out. And I was just experimenting with that constantly to finally redirect my tics to be, instead of large noticeable movements, it would be more discreet, like rolling my stomach, or, you know, clenching my butt cheeks, or tensing my legs, and, you know, maybe jittering on my toes, or something like that. That's a bit more, people would not think twice if they saw it.
You're amazing, Seamus, because I'm a presenter as well, as you know, and a producer. And coming from a presenter's angle, you are already thinking of a million things in your head. You're
Yeah.
interviewing someone, for example, and you're thinking, you're listening, but you're also thinking about your next question, and you're thinking about the angle you're facing and where the camera is and how the sound is. You've got a lot of things going on in your mind, but then you also had this additional thing that you had to try and control. So I can only just imagine what noise was going on in your mind.
Yeah, I remember distinct times where, so one of my tics is flicking my head back as if you're saying hello to a friend and they're walking past. And I remember sitting there having to interview someone. I think it might have been Guy Sebastian or Ricky Lee, or I don't know who it was. I can't remember. I just remember sitting there thinking, I really need to do this tic. How can I let it out? And then when I asked them a question, in my response, I would essentially flick the head back and open my mouth as if to say, oh yeah, and laugh and over accentuate and nod to really kind of slip it in there.
Amazing. Truly, truly amazing. Well, I love that you are getting up on stage and talking about your flaws being your superpower. Tell me more about it. Tell me about the message. Tell me about who you're delivering this to and why.
So the reason why I'm doing this is because I have been through that struggle of accepting that I'm different and not letting that hold me back from really pursuing what I wanted. And that was being a TV presenter. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I feel a lot of people don't lean into who they are as a person, and they think that their insecurities are a setback. And what I have learned is that everybody has flaws, everybody has insecurities, but it's up to you as the individual if that insecurity, or if that flaw, if that characteristic, that adversity is going to be a flaw or a strength. You still have it. That's not going away, but it's up to you to put it into either category. So my keynote on turning your flaw into a superpower is really about embracing every aspect of who you are, leaning into it, discovering your true self and your happiness, and getting more confident. Because I feel that when you stop ignoring, stop holding back, when you are just blatantly, unapologetically yourself, you're happier because you're not hiding all the time. And I just see so many people do that, and I can tell because I have that. I've been through that journey. I can see when someone's hiding their true selves, and it hurts, and I don't like seeing it. So essentially, my mission is to tell as many people, hey, be yourself, really lean into it, stuff what everyone else thinks. Who cares? Just lean into your full personality. And if you think it's a setback, then that is your own. You've put the roadblock up before it's even a reality. So it's not a setback. You've just created it. And I give this talk in schools, organizations, businesses, conferences, sporting clubs, everywhere. And the main takeaways are building resilience and overcoming adversity. And yeah, turning that flaw into a superpower. It's essentially my way of instilling confidence in people because yeah, everyone feels like they have something to hide, I guess.
You touched on adolescence earlier and how so many teens and tweens and young people really just want to fit into the mold. And I think now people are waking up a lot more. I feel like from when I was that age to now, things are shifting in the right direction a lot more. There's a lot more conversation about celebrating how unique we are and just, being our true selves. Like, for example, you getting on stage at a school is, we wouldn't have heard that when I was a teenager, and we were just too focused on all dressing the same and looking and sounding like one another and having our hair the same. It's just such a thing that we all did. And I love that you've you've picked out this one thing about yourself that's not like everyone else, and you're using it to share your story, to elevate your messaging, and to share your experiences in a positive way. And you and I both know, working in media, you do need to have a point of difference, otherwise you're just going to fit in, and you don't want to fit in the world of media. You need to have that point of difference where people say, oh yes, that's the guy who's talking about resilience, that's the girl who's talking about mindset, that's that, so you've really done that here in such a wonderful and exciting way. And I suppose your TV experience and the way that you are, your mannerisms on camera, and you're so colorful, really would take off with the younger generation.
Yeah, well, I hope so. That's that whole aim. And I've noticed when I do this talk, a lot of students come up to me afterwards, teary-eyed, and they say thank you. And I can tell it's really resonated with them because they're battling with something themselves. And it's really powerful. And when I see them come up to say, oh, what you said really resonated with me, I can just tell they're going through something. And it feels great to know that I've gotten through to them to say, hey, it's okay. It's all right. It's not going to be as bad as you think. Just hang in there and keep going. And yeah, it's quite rewarding. I have found it, I don't want to say more rewarding than being in the media and on radio and television, because I love that. And that has a different feeling and a different sense in the community. But this is a new feeling of rewarding. I've not experienced this before. When I was on radio, I was the funny guy. So I was always making jokes. And every now and then I would open up about something a little bit intimate about myself. And that would resonate with people. And a lot of people would come up to me and, oh, when you said that a few weeks ago, that resonated with me. But yeah, this is a different feeling, I guess, because it's so visual and I can see the crowd and I can look at the people who I can tell it's really hammering home for them. And to see that message sink in is really powerful, because in radio, you can't see the audience. You have no idea if they're actually listening to what you're saying. You just think, oh, they're just driving in traffic and, the radio's down and they're smoking or they're on the phone to someone. You have no idea. But this, I can actually see it in their eyes right in front of me. So yeah, it's a really new feeling for me.
There's definitely something powerful in, and I've done it too, throwing away the scripts that people give you and creating your own script and talking about something that isn't about you, that isn't personal, to then shifting to talking about what's going on with you. It's a completely different ball game, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm a big fan of going off the script. In fact, a lot of my stand-up comedy I haven't done it for a few months now, because this keynote speaking career has really starting to get, I'm just getting a lot of talks.
It's taking off. The next Tony Robbins, I think.
Well, so I actually haven't done a lot of comedy lately. I'll be doing it next year. But what I really started to do was improv on stage. I would go up with no material, or I'd have one or two jokes in the back of my head thinking, oh, I might work with that. But I would completely just improvise on stage and just interact with the audience. And that adrenaline rush of having nothing planned and just seeing what happens, padding water for 5 to 10 minutes, was one of the biggest rushes ever. And you'd know if you do poorly, oh my gosh, if no one laughs, you definitely know you're alive. It's the worst feeling in the world. But when you make something up on stage, when you create a joke off the cuff and people laugh, it's one of the greatest feelings.
Oh, I think what you just described there is probably most people's worst realization to have to stand in front of people unprepared and try and make them laugh. Like, people are petrified of public speaking as it is, but also having to make people laugh on top of that. Well done to you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking, but I love it. I have two different styles to prep. So before stand-up comedy, I tell myself that I'm going to bomb. No one's going to laugh. It's going to suck and it's going to be horrible. But before I go up on stage for my keynote talk, I do the complete opposite. And I tell myself, everyone's going to love it. It's going to be great. I'm going to remember everything, because I have to have two different mindsets. For stand-up comedy, I have to have this mindset that no one is going to laugh and it's going to suck. Because if I have that expectation, then if someone laughs, I've done well. But for some reason, when I get up on this keynote stage, I give myself the confidence to really go out there hammering, and I really motivate myself and I encourage myself to be confident. And that seems to work more, and I don't get nervous, but I have to be nervous for stand up, and I have to tell myself not to be nervous for the keynote stage. I don't know why, but that's just how I have learned that that's the best way for me. I don't know why, but that's what's working.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're segregating the, the different roles that you've got and the variety in your career. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I guess there's no pressure to be funny in a keynote stage. I naturally find jokes up on stage. Sometimes it's completely off the cuff and I laugh at myself like an idiot. But other times it's planned jokes that I've been doing for 10 years. So I think I'm not nervous because I know that those jokes, because I've worked on it for so long, I know, they're going to work. They've never not worked. So they'll work. They'll be fine. But yeah, it's just different. Stand up and keynote talking are very different beasts.
Well, we always look at the big motivational speakers, like I mentioned Tony Robbins earlier, and he has the dancing and the music, and that's the preparation that he does and pumps everyone up, and the breaking of the boards and the walking on the fire. Do you do any of that to prepare yourself or your audience?
I do integrate with the audience as much as I can. I like to. The last keynote I did, I picked on someone because the way I've put my keynote talk together is there are little anchor points throughout that I keep referring to. So there's almost little setups and callbacks for the end. And I pick on one person and I keep referring to them in a friendly way. I'm not ripping on them, but I make them a bit of a character throughout the whole thing. And like, for example, one of the things I say, what do you want for Christmas? Because I intertwine that with when I got my job on television, it was like getting the best present underneath the tree Christmas morning. But when they were going to fire me, it was like getting that present taken away. And the last time I did it, I said to this guy, I don't know, his name was Gary. And I was like, what do you want for Christmas, mate? And he couldn't answer. I said, do you want a pony, do you, buddy? Mm-hmm. And everyone laughed because, I was belittling him in a comical way. And so, yeah, I always find little areas to integrate. But at the very beginning, I get about 6 people up and I do a no blinking competition to really get the point across that when you don't tick, that's the same feeling when you don't blink. It's the same feeling as not ticking. And I bring that up later. And then at the end, I get everybody to stand up. And I still haven't worked out if it's corny or motivating or I don't know, but it's fun. I get everybody up and I go, we're going to turn a FLAW into a, and I get the whole crowd to yell, Superpower. Yeah. And I just did it once. I can't remember how, but it just came about. And then I thought, hey, that's pretty fun. Everyone gets involved. And I did it for the first time at my old school because there's a really powerful story I've integrated into my keynote talk of there's a yellow hat. And I'll try and sum up this story for you. It's a yellow hat. It's like a bucket hat, right? It's just got the little brim with the little yellow bucket hat on the back of the neck. Yeah. And it's got the school crest on it. And that hat has been a part of that school for 14 years, 15 now. And the theme of my talk is through acceptance, passion, and determination, you can turn your FLAW into a superpower. And I talk about that the kid who started that hat, he was not an athletic student and he was not an academic student, and he felt out of place, like a square peg in a round hole. And he learned that his place wasn't on the field, it was on the sidelines cheering on his mates. So he accepted that and got this hat. And he found that that was his passion. So what he did is he became determined to be at every single game this school played, every single game, and cheer on his best mates. And then what happened, the more times he did that, other students would follow. After their games, they would join him and they would cheer with him, and he would start leading the chants. And over a course of a year, there were very large crowds at these games and he was leading on the chants. And what happened at the end of grade 12, he took the hat off, wrote his name, and then passed it on to someone else in that school. And then that kid for a year did it. And it's only a year 12er that gets to wear that yellow hat. It's not a part of the uniform. It was just created, and it's only determined by the students. And this has happened for 15 years, and it just got passed down a few weeks ago. And that was me who started that. That was me who wore the hat 14 years ago. And I held the hat for the first time in 14 years when I was giving this talk at my old school. And I got quite emotional because I was like, wow, this hat has lived on. This hat has created tradition. This hat has created a legacy, a culture around these 2,000 students. This hat is idolized. It's well respected, and it's turned into a prefect role. And it's still not determined by the teachers. It's only done by the students. It's had such a ripple flow aspect. And that was because of that acceptance, passion, and determination. Yeah, I wasn't athletic, I wasn't academic, but I had something. And I lent into that. And it was a real indication of my FLAW becoming a superpower. And I thought, because I used to lead the chants on, I thought, okay, this is what I'll do. And I put the hat on and I led the school in a large chant, which I hadn't done in 14 years. And when I did that, when I told that message and when I shared that story, so many people came up to me and said, that was really powerful. And I thought, well, maybe that's more powerful than the actual talk I give. So I now add that into every single talk that I do.
Oh, I absolutely love it. And I love how you're just being so uniquely and unapologetically you all the time, every minute. There's no pretending you're someone else. You're just genuinely you. I've been listening to a couple of other podcast interviews with you, and I actually really enjoyed this chat though, because you've been incredibly real throughout this whole conversation, and it's you're definitely helping people. You're creating such awareness around Tourette's.
Yeah, so I'm an ambassador for the Tourettes Syndrome Association Australia, and I only linked up with them a year ago. And up until that point, I had actually never been a part of the Tourette's community. I was always the only one who had Tourette's in my immediate. I'd never met anyone else with Tourette's. It was just me. And so when I linked up with these guys, I met so many other people with really strong Tourette's. And it was a really powerful and impactful in my life and it taught me something. So I've had Tourette since I was born. So I've had 31 years of experience with tics. But I met some kids who are 16 and they got it 2 years ago. And their tics are so prominent and they're so, I wouldn't say aggressive, but they're just so full on. And I remember thinking, wow, that's so intense. And I thought, well, I've had 31 years of managing my tics. This kid's only had 2 years. And the things that they experience and go through is really heartbreaking because there is no cure. And because it's so visual and so noticeable, it's in everybody's face. It's not a syndrome that if you don't tell anyone, no one will notice. Everyone notices. And I don't have coprolalia. So coprolalia is the swearing tic, profanity tic. That's when you say a profanity sentence, you swear, whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't have that. I have had words and I've got a few, I say, yeah, man. That's only come back recently. That's called echolalia. So when I met these kids who have these really strong coprolalia tics where they're screaming at the top of their heads, these horrible sentences. And I think, oh, I feel so sorry for what you have to go through. And I had not experienced that. I'd only experienced what I have been through, but I can relate to them. Mm. So it's been really rewarding, impactful, and powerful for me to meet these students and these kids. And next year, another offering that I will be having, and I've actually got a school lined up in Sydney next year, where I will be talking to staff and teachers about how to interact and manage kids who are neurodiverse and who have Tourette's, ADHD, disengaged. And I've actually had to team up with a child and adolescent psychiatrist specifically in the area of Tourette's and ADHD and OCD and autism, because I only know my own experience. I don't know everybody else's. And I've heard these horror stories of these poor girls, 16 years old, going through their own adolescence journey, which is hard enough, but they're being kicked out of school because of their Tourette's. And I just think, oh, that sucks that they have to go through that and they don't have a voice against the principal who's kicked them out. but this is my chance. This is their chance to have their voice. So that's going to be another offering I will have for schools to actually educate the teachers on how to teach their students who have Tourette's, which is my chance to get back at the teachers who I didn't like. Oh, my God.
Train the trainers. I absolutely love that idea.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You're doing such incredible work, and people can find you pretty much on every social media platform out there. You're TikToking at the moment. Yes. You're on Instagram. You're on LinkedIn. You're probably on Facebook too, no doubt. And your website. So we will provide a link to that. I'm sure people listening are going to be wanting to book you for a keynote speech for their school or their workshop, or actually just want to join in. So can you please invite me to the next one? I would very much like to come. But I do ask everyone this question now on this podcast, and it's a big one. So I'll give you a minute to think about it. But the title of this podcast, Things You Can't Unhear. And I heard something one day that inspired me to start this podcast and change the way that I lived and perceive the way that the world was or my life was. So is there something that you have heard in the past or have read or experienced that you could not unhear, that changed something within you?
Yes, absolutely. It was when I was going from television to radio. I quit at 23 years of age from Adelaide. I moved to Melbourne, and I stumbled upon the story of Buddha. And I'll sum it up really fast. But Buddha was born into a palace, and he was very rich with a big family. He had no struggles in the world. And his dad said, you don't need to leave the palace. You've got everything here. But he thought that's not what life is all about. So he left, and he lived amongst the commoners. And he saw beggars, he saw starving people, and he became a street person like them. And again, he was like, this is still unsatisfying. And so he thought, what's the meaning of life? So he went and sat under a tree, and he said, I'm not leaving this tree until I work out what the meaning of life is. And it took weeks, but he discovered what his meaning of life was. It was, life is suffering. So choose what suffering you wish to endure. And that stuck with me, because I thought, that's when I really pursued radio, because the suffering of radio was living in a small country town doing breakfast radio. And I'm like, that's amazing. So that's when I really pursued it. And it was falling in love with the suffering of the journey you've chosen. And that's what's going to make you happy and more rewarding, instead of hating what you do now for that end result. If you fall in love with that suffering journey, then you are going to love the whole process.
Oh, I love that. And thank you so much for simplifying Buddha's message as well. You know, we all can understand and take something from that. And there's a huge message in that. So thank you so much, Seamus, for today. I've absolutely loved every minute of talking to you. I can't wait to see what's next and where you pop up, and you know, what's next in your amazing career that you've had so far.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really great chat, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'd love to keep the conversation going. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and if something really profound came up for you that you want to share, let's talk about it. You can find me on Instagram at Things You Can't Unhear, or on my personal page at Maritza_Barone. And if someone you know will benefit from something that was said in this show, make sure you share it with them too. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and keep up to date with what's next. And if you can spare a few seconds, please rate and review the show on iTunes, just so other people can find us more easily and quickly. And as always, my friends, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.